Good morning and happy Monday. Well, or something. I don't know about you guys, but I used to hate Mondays. I used to hate getting up. And then I found a job that I really enjoy. So it's not so tough getting up on a Monday and going to work when you're like, okay, I know this sounds a little bit corny, but when you actually like what you do. Anywho, it is way too early, and the mist and fog and all that good stuff is hanging thick in the air, and I'm, as per usual, on the way to the gym. So I thought that this wonderful or very, very early morning we were going to talk about some paradigms. Specifically, the paradigms that we are going to talk about is functional programming and object-oriented programming. And just to kind of, I think I might be repeating myself on this one, but I want to touch on it again because I want to give you a sensation of the way that I think about these two paradigms. Because right now, and this has been going on for quite some time, right now there are people are putting themselves into different, like they're picking sides almost. We have the object-oriented people, and then we have the functional people, and it's almost like there is this rivalry, if you will, between the two. And in a sense, there is a small rivalry, because for whatever reason, there are people who are still having a discussion about single quotes versus double quotes and all that good stuff. And by the by, in the battle of single quotes versus double quotes, there is a very nice talk by Douglas Crawford, and I think he has definitively proven that double quotes are better than single quotes. And you are going to love this. I could kiss that man. He's just, wow. He made such a great point. So in the context of JavaScript, he made the argument that if you have to pick between the two, you should go with double quotes. And the only reason for that is because if you are writing in English, or you're using abbreviated words such as don't instead of do not, then you need a single quote. And if you have single quotes for your representation of a string, then you will need to escape that middle single quote, otherwise it will break. And he said that's the only thing he could really think of that would make sense in any way, like that would make the difference. And I thought it was such an elegant and nice little aha moment. Well, yeah, he is actually right. That does make sense. For that one case, there is actually a better way of doing it. So double quotes, people. This question has finally been answered. On to the paradigms. So, as you may or may not know, I have been looking for a job for quite some time, and I found it, and I'm excited to start at my new company. It's going to be amazing. And during this process, I took the liberty of, because there was a massive amount of people looking for developers here in Gothenburg. And so I because I'm one of those people who want to work with people who are passionate about what they're doing, and not just passionate but also very knowledgeable and smart, and people that you can learn from, right? I had to invent some questions of my own, and one of my favorite questions that there's no wrong answer here, but the question I would ask, and this is to some fairly senior people, some of them could, I only met two people through this entire month or 6 weeks or whatever it was looking for a job. I found two people who could, in a satisfying way, answer this question. So I asked them, because I know that functional is all the rage right now. I simply asked, so when would you say that an object-oriented approach would be better suited for solving a specific type of problem versus a functional approach, and vice versa? So when do you use which? And almost every single person I spoke to, almost every single one of them, they couldn't answer the question. And some of them, like the people who were pretending to be seniors, but you listen how people think, and you kind of reveal very quickly that, okay, maybe you're, because I don't know why that is. Like, people pretend to know more than they do. I try to never do that. Like, I'm just trying to be as honest as humanly possible. And just, don't try to be smart, because smart people will ask you questions and they will hear that you're not that advanced. And it's okay. I mean, we're all in different places in our careers, right? So, don't pretend you're not something you're not. Instead, try to learn from people who are better. That's what I do. And anyway, they couldn't answer. And the people who couldn't answer, I mean, that's okay. And then you had people who were, they had never thought about it, because, and this I think has to do with trends. Like you get into a mindset that, oh, this is my thing, and you really like it, and you go down that route, and you never ever question why you're going down that route. So you miss out on like seeing a more holistic viewpoint, if you will. It's the same thing that, take metabolism. Some people, I'll ask people, fitness people, like, would you have a slow or a fast metabolism? And the fitness people who really know their shit is going to say, well, it depends. Because it does depend. If you're trying to lose weight, then yeah, a faster metabolism is probably good. If you're trying to gain weight, because it's not just about losing weight some of the time, a slower metabolism could be beneficial, because you can add more muscle mass. Anyway, the same applies here. So most of them would say, oh, I'm just all functional. Almost every single one of them would say that they're all functional. And after they ranted on and on and on about functional and like the benefits, and they completely neglected object-oriented programming, I threw my coin into the, as I said, I'll throw in an idea here, just to see if you agree, just to see. So, functional programming makes testing very, very easy, and in theory, it makes composition and reusable code easy. I argue that your reusable code is probably that's the hardest thing in programming. Some people say it's threads, I say it's reusable code. Reusable code means, in my opinion, making very generic code, and if you need to abide by the golden rule, which my golden rule and hopefully a lot of other people's golden rule, which is keep it simple, stupid, making things generic immediately makes things more complicated than they need to be. So I argue that it's the same problem that we have with mathematics. If you make something too reusable or generic, it becomes very difficult for our brains to comprehend. We like things to be specific and concrete. That's the way our minds work. That's why we teach kids to, count apples and like physical things. We don't teach them it can't be too generic. It has to have some type of semantic meaning to our minds to make it understandable. Anyway, so that's what functional does really well. So whenever you want to create logic, like any type of logic, I argue that's a good thing to do. So maybe all your methods inside of your code should be pure functions as much as humanly possible. And then you of course have database access and IO things that you need to make impure, which at some point you're going to have to break the pure function rule in order to actually make something meaningful with it. But then and most people are with me up until that point. And then I say, but then you have object-oriented programming. So when does it make sense to do that? Well, actually, if you think about it, we already have, and you don't think about it at a conscious level. React does it. All the mobile platforms does it, and even a few other platforms as well. So the best answer I got was from this guy who worked at my services. Really clever guy. I loved his answer. He said that there are problems or concepts that very naturally become object-oriented. And so we kind of nerded out there for a moment, and I said, exactly. Because if you think about it, if you've done mobile development, every single, it doesn't matter if it's Android or if it's iOS or Windows or whatever, you get an interface for, say, a button. You get an object-oriented button with certain properties that you can extend and customize. That's the way it works. Same things for all these elements. So you get that object for free from the API that you use in order to do mobile development. And you have to, that's object-oriented programming. I mean, you don't get a function, you get an object that you extend, like mutate and so forth, because it's a collection of properties, and it abstracts away the underlying mechanisms of drawing a standardized button onto the interface. So how would you do that function in a functional way? I don't know. I really don't. And then I go one further and I say, and if you think about it, whenever you're making a view or say a React component, that's an object. Every single React component is an object, and it is an object because you need, for the most part, there is, of course, the case for the pure functions, the pure rendered functions in React, and it's absolutely true that you can make this a completely functional pure thing. But if you need lifecycle events, such as component did mount, component will unmount or will mount, these lifecycle events are needed for you to do certain things. And that's also object-oriented programming. So the way that I express this is that if you have a container management system, such as Apache Tomcat, like Tomcat uses Java in the same way, like servlets, then you need object-oriented programming, because you're providing an environment, a programming environment for your consumers, like us programmers who are like using the Spring framework or just Java EE. We need a way to create basically a little box of code, an object of code that exposes a certain type of interface, so that we can communicate between our code and what's happening in the context of the system that's running our application. I mean, the server needs to be able to communicate to our code when certain things happen, and we need to be able to respond to those things as they happen. And that very naturally becomes an object-oriented thing. And then you have things such as I said, component will mount and did mount and so forth. Same thing with React. Sometimes you want to express that, hey, I want my code to do these things when this happens. And that's in essence a container management system. So you need to be able to create an object or have some type of box where you can put your code and then have this nice bridge of lifecycle events that the container management system can use to communicate to your code. There are probably other ways that this is meaningful. I mean, if you want to go soft skills, it's very efficient the domain-driven development paradigm is, for better or for worse, I don't think you have to have it that way. I don't think you need to work in a domain-driven fashion, but it did get popular for a reason, and it has solved problems. It has created a lot of problems as well, I'm gonna argue, but it's not just bad. I mean, to me, I can absolutely say that there is a very nice, it's a very big benefit to a project, especially with a lot of stakeholders, to be able to like do the object-oriented and domain-driven design thing, and create this domain language that everybody can naturally talk about. I honestly think that it's maybe a little overvalued how important that is. I think that there are alternatives that would work just as well, but it's also a small benefit to this approach. And so what I'm trying to sell you here on, it's not, right, you have to be philosophical and so clever and so forth. It's more, I'm more trying to sell you on the idea that instead of jumping on a hype train and just looking at things from one perspective and getting caught up in all of the hype about something, take the good parts think about the good parts. Try to think about like when does it make sense to do one thing over another, and maybe you'll find that the thing that you're hyped up about is always a better choice. I mean, that could be absolutely the case. Sometimes you're absolutely right. Your hype is very justified, but at least start by thinking about the different use cases, because let's be honest here, you know, whatever you feel about a certain way of working, there are people who are making it work, and I'm pretty sure that it's not all bad, if you know what I'm saying. Like, I think it's very rare that you have people doing things in a certain way and it has like no value whatsoever, because nobody in their right mind would use a working pattern like functional or object-oriented programming or so forth and have absolutely no success using it. There's no benefit whatsoever. I mean, that would be insanity. So try to think about these things before you dismiss something. It's a healthier way of developing your skill set, I would say. I mean, look at me. I'm a fairly strong advocate to avoid locking yourself into the Microsoft workspace and all of that stuff, because I'm not a big fan of having, I don't know, I like things to be generic enough so that I can move between platforms. That's why I like Java and so forth. And I'm right now going more into C# and learning the .NET framework, just because I think it's healthy. Like, I don't think I'm going to be a full-time like C# developer anytime soon, but I think that, you know, I mean, Microsoft, they do some pretty cool stuff as well. I mean, I might not like them as a company per se, but I don't really like Apple, or like, there's a lot of companies I don't like, but it's for me. Like, you see, like it's for my personal development, and being able to, you know, take a step back and say, hey, okay, maybe this isn't my favorite thing in the world, but I'm gonna just have a little play with it and see if there are some cool ideas, because maybe there are. That, I think, is a pretty healthy way of thinking about things.